Greetings all! I am Anime Otaku Drew, also known as Straw Hat Otaku Drew. Yes, I am starting a dedicated One Piece channel. It will be packed with theories like this, chapter and episode reviews and reactions, and other such things that are standard fare for a One Piece YouTube channel, all with my own personal touch. I will share this video on both Anime Otaku Drew and Straw Hat Otaku Drew, just to make sure all of my followers are aware of the new channel and everyone has a chance to watch this. But henceforth, all of the One Piece related content will be on Straw Hat Otaku Drew, with the possible exception of the follow-up to my Void Century theory video, which was originally shared on Anime Otaku Drew in July of 2022. And the follow-up for which is nearly ready. Kind of. Anyways, a while back, I watched an amazing, in-depth theory video from Marshall D. Preach called The Ultimate God Valley Theory, which I will link in the description just in case you guys want to check it out. It's a bit long at almost 2 hours, but there is a lot of fascinating and compelling information in that video, so I would definitely recommend checking it out. We're here now because that video reignited the sparks of an idea I had rumbling around in my head for quite some time, as well as filling in a few blanks in my own ideas. I originally intended this to be 2 videos, but with the release of Chapter 1095, the God Valley flashback has officially begun. Thus, it feels like I have to get my entire God Valley theory out there now or never. Because if I'm right about any of the major parts in my theory, nobody's going to believe that I correctly predicted it if I don't say anything until after the fact. And if I'm wrong, well, I've been wrong about theories before. See my video about whether Grogu would choose the lightsaber or the Beskar in the Book of Boba Fett, as a shining example of a swing and a miss. So, I don't really care if I'm wrong. So, as a result of this sped up timeline, I now find myself needing to combine both planned videos into one for the sake of expediency. I don't intend for it to be as long as that comprehensive theory video on Preach's channel, but it will unavoidably end up well more than just the quick theory I intended each of the 2 videos to be. What I can promise is that the theory I'm presenting here, while it does share a couple elements with Preach's theory, is largely centered around ideas and specifics that I have not heard anyone talk about or even suggest before now. So, if you're interested in a completely new and original God Valley theory, at least as far as I'm aware, then I hope you'll grab your favorite drink, maybe a snack, get comfortable, open your mind, and prepare to be stunned as I reveal to you some shocking hidden secrets from the manga and anime we all love. I feel confident that by the end of this video, I will have convinced you of something. So, it'll be worth your time to stick around and watch the whole video. But, don't click that like button yet. You need to watch the video first. I don't want you to like it unless you like it. So, while I was watching that video, a lot of thoughts occurred to me which Preach did not mention, but which could actually support his theory. In particular, it really got my brain working when Preach suggested that a certain character could actually be the child of one of the Tenryubito and ended up separated from their birth family and raised elsewhere. I had heard the idea suggested before, but I was always really dismissive of it, thinking that it sounded kind of forced. However, as Preach made his case, I became increasingly convinced that he might be onto something, but hadn't figured out the entire story. And that's where I come in. I've spent a lot of time since watching that video trying to put the pieces together into a cohesive narrative that could successfully take us from point A, when the character was an infant or a toddler at God Valley, to point B, when we meet the character in the normal course of the story. In doing so, a lot of those pieces just fell so perfectly into place, and it made a few things that didn't add up about God Valley before suddenly make sense, to the point that I really do believe this is a strong possibility of what might have happened in the wake of the God Valley incident. Now, before I dive into the theory properly, I feel like I should give a spoiler warning, as this revision of my original theory is now going to include information all the way up to the currently newest chapter, 1095. If you're not caught up with the manga to that point, then I advise you to add this video to your watch later list and go catch up now. There's so much lore that has just been revealed that I know I would have hated it if someone had spoiled it for me. Once you're caught up, then come back here and get ready to have your mind blown. Here's your last chance to click away before the spoilers ensue. Okay, now that it's just those of us who have already read 1095, along with people who don't care about spoilers, I can get into it. I do, however, feel a quick rundown of exactly what God Valley is might be a good idea for those I don't care about spoilers people. So, for those who already know, please bear with me. God Valley was an island in the West Blue that the Tenryubito visited 38 years ago as part of a tradition where every 3 years they chose a new island and go hunt the people that lived there, presumably receiving points for their kills, most likely some kind of system similar to Death Race 2000, maybe, where the young and strong and athletic ones are worth more points, while the weak and the infirm and the elderly are worth less points. Or maybe it's based off of the status or station of the people killed, but clearly they're getting some kind of points for their kills. And there are 6 treasure chests present that are most likely prizes for the winners. It's clear that the Tenryubito were present, including Mac Tonight. Vigorland Garling. No, the younger Vigorland Garling. Yeah, that's the one. And as you can see, he looks far too Shanks-like for it to be an accident. Also, there's J. Garcia Saturn, who looks identical to the way he does in Egghead Island arc, in spite of the fact that this was 38 years earlier. In addition to the Tenryubito, there are a number of their slaves present, including a young Bartholomew Kuma, a young Emporio Ivankov, and a new character, a young girl named Ginny, who calls Ivankov Aniki, which technically means big brother, but that doesn't always refer to a blood relation, so let's try not to read too much into that just yet. And this girl, who much of the fandom are now considering to be the most likely candidate to be mother of a certain Jewelry Bonnie, possibly even a certain Monkey D. Luffy, which I'm not so sure on that last one. I mean, I don't know. Maybe. We know this location ends up being attacked by Roxy Xebec and his crew as part of his plan to become king of the world. Now, all we know for sure about the events that transpired during the attack is that both Monkey D. Garp and Gol D. Roger happened to be present and had to work together in order to successfully fend off the attack and protect the Tenryubito. Furthermore, we know that in the aftermath of that battle, which is now known as the God Valley Incident, Garp was labeled the hero of the Marines, and the island of God Valley disappeared without a trace. It was apparently at God Valley that Charlotte Linlin got a hold of the devil fruit, which she gave to Kaido, as well as where Roxy Xebec was defeated and subsequently forgotten by history. And yes, I did specifically say forgotten by history, rather than erased by the world government, as many people seem to believe. I even used to believe that. But I recently saw a video, which I'm sorry, I cannot remember whose video it was. Apologies to that person. But that video made the astute observation that Sengoku freely spoke about rocks. And it was only when the conversation turned to what happened to God Valley, the island specifically, and its disappearance, that he stopped and suggested that this was a subject it might be best not to discuss. Because of this, the way in which God Valley actually disappeared has yet to be revealed to us. So, now that we've established everything we know of God Valley and the incident that occurred there, just what character am I suggesting was the child of a Tenryubito who was lost during those events and ended up being raised elsewhere? Well, I'm sure a lot of you are automatically thinking of red-haired Shanks, considering he was found by Roger as an infant in a treasure chest and seems to have ties to the Figureland family of Tenryubito. And the timing of him being found is suspiciously aligned with the God Valley incident. And while I do very much think that this is the case, that's not who I'm talking about here. And the two are not mutually exclusive, so Shanks being the child of a Tenryubito would not exclude the possibility that this other character I'm going to speak of could be one as well. In fact, from what we know about the scope of this Tenryubito event that was being held at God Valley, it's entirely possible that the children of many of the Tenryubito were brought along for the festivities, with maybe a child care area set up for those who were too young to take part in the hunt. Who knows? Now, I would generally lay out all of my evidence in chronological order, building up to my point. But in this case, I feel I can best demonstrate the likelihood of my point by working backwards. That is, starting with the conclusion and then walking you all back through the events to prove it. With that said, the long-lost child of the Tenryubito is none other than Aneru. As we all know, Aneru, or Enel, was the self-proclaimed god of Skypiea. The story revealed to us that he came to Skypiea from another sky country known as Burka, but Aneru himself apparently destroyed Burka before traveling to Skypiea, with his group of zealots in tow. Now, I do want to point out that I'm used to referring to him as Aneru, as the subtitled anime was where I first reached the Skypiea arc, and in that version, that was how they romanized his name. However, in light of what I've put together here, I think I might need to break that habit, as there is a very good reason he is called NL. But before I get to that, let's talk about how NL even came to be in the sky in the first place, if he's the child of a Tenryubito. That comes down to the fate of God Valley itself in the wake of the God Valley incident. As I said before, we don't actually know what happened to God Valley, but from the language used to describe it, it's possible to infer that whatever that fate was, it's something different from the destruction of O'Hara from the Buster Call, or Lelucia from whatever weapon that Eam powered up with the Mother Flame, and then subsequently unleashed upon it. And if God Valley simply disappeared rather than being destroyed, then it's entirely possible that it could still be out there somewhere. Entirely, or at least mostly, intact. In Preach's video, the idea that led to this theory was that God Valley ended up being sent to the sky, rather like the majority of Jaya was 400 years ago. Now, I've heard a lot of people guess that the disappearance of God Valley is probably a counterpoint to the disappearance of Shandora on Jaya. That is, where Shandora was sent to the sky, they believe God Valley was sent to the seafloor. I, however, believe that Oda set up Jaya not as an opposite, but as a parallel to foreshadow God Valley. There are a few different ways this could have happened. Perhaps something caused a knock upstream, just like at Jaya, or maybe Kaido, while still getting used to his devil fruit, unknowingly used his flame clouds to send it skyward. Or it could be that Shiki used his float powers to make it rise. Or maybe there was a user of the Nikyu no Mi that pawed it up into the clouds. Like, maybe this is where Kuma gets his devil fruit, and not being used to it ends up pushing the island up. I don't know. I'm not sure how that would work, but who knows? We've seen some crazy ass shit in One Piece. So I'm not going to dismiss the possibility. Or it could even be something that we just don't know about. The how of it isn't really important. Just the idea that it got there. So, what happened to God Valley once it reached the sky? Well, the point that Marshall D. Preach suggested is that it became Burka and was inhabited by sky people. The thing is, if there was a whole island of Verth in Burka, it wouldn't have been necessary for Enel to travel to Skypiea to take control of the Verth of Upper Garden. He would have already had Verth right there, ready for him to lord over. Instead, I suggest that after God Valley was sent up to the White Sea, it began to slowly sink back through. I don't think God Valley is Burka, but rather that it reached the sky in a place where some of the people from Burka found it. Of course, these people would have been very curious about this large mass of Verth that suddenly entered their domain. So they would naturally want to explore it, and upon doing so, they would have found and retrieved the hastily abandoned belongings of the Tenryubito who had evacuated, the bodies of anyone that was killed in the incident, all left behind in the survivors' haste to escape as Garp evacuated them during the battle. And there, amid all this death and destruction, these people of Burka find a hidden small child with giant-ass earlobes. Now, the Blue Sea is a huge place, and the Sky People had no way of knowing where on the Blue Sea this child called home, or if he even had a home to go back to with his, what might have very well have been his island up here in the clouds now, and the only other people there being dead. So there's not any reasonable way to find this child's family, if he had any left, and return him to them. What were they supposed to do? Call up Big News Morgans and have him run an ad asking the world, "Do you know this child?" Come on. These are Sky People we're talking about. Most of them are probably barely even aware that the Blue Sea exists. I'd be shocked if any of them knew about Blue Sea newspapers, and especially how to contact them. So, instead, they took in the child, gathered everything they could from the island before it sank back through the clouds and fell, vanishing forever into the depths of the sea. Huh. I guess the bottom of the sea group ended up being right in the end after all. Okay. The final disposition of the island of God Valley is immaterial. Maybe it fell back through the clouds, maybe it is drifting around up in the White Sea, maybe Enel destroyed it with Burka. What matters is that the Sky People took in this human child, and he was raised among them. So, what evidence is there for this? Well, I would first point out that unlike all of the other Sky People we've seen, Enel has no wings. That was something that struck me even as I watched the first time. I've heard people suggest that he had his wings removed, but considering the size of the wings Sky People have on their backs, the removal would leave some pretty gnarly scars. And we saw nothing like that on Enel's back. From the very first time I saw Enetter, I was already questioning whether we would get some surprise reveal that he was actually from the Blue Sea. Next, I would like you to consider for a moment how, in some parts of the world, particularly in the past, it has been a standard practice for the wealthy and nobility to have their initials ornately embroidered on their clothing as a sign of their status. Now, imagine these Sky People find this human infant. They know they can't return him to his family, so they have to raise and take care of him. However, they don't know the child's name. But as they inspect the child to make sure he's healthy and unharmed, they discover a fancy set of initials embroidered on the clothing. and decide to just call him by those initials, NL. Now, those initials tell us everything. They tell us why Rox D. Xebec felt he could become king of the world by attacking God Valley during the Tenryubito's human hunt. They tell us exactly who NL is related to, and so much more. From those initials, I feel confident that I can even tell you NL's real name. Now, let's start with those last two, actually. We know that the world government was started by 20 kings who united their forces and overthrew the ancient kingdom. And we know that the families of those 20 kings, well, all but one of those 20 kings, moved to Marie-Joie and became the Tenryubito. Now, until recently, the only names we knew from those 20 were the Nefertari family of Alabasta, who of course chose to remain in their kingdom instead of joining the other 19 at Marie-Joie, and the Don Quixote family of Dressrosa. However, as I noted earlier, we recently learned about another one in the Figureland family, from which our favorite red-locked rogue probably was born. But the Figurelands aren't the only other family name we've learned. We've also learned the names of the Gorosei, who presumably are Tenryubito themselves, meaning that there should be a J. Garcia family, a Shepard family, an Ethan or an Ethan Barron family, a Topman family, and a Marcus family. Still no ends there, though. Oh, but wait. We have one other name that has been revealed to us, so let's try that one. Thanks to Emplorio Ivankov, we have now learned that one of those original 20 kings went by the name of Nerona Im. That is, of course, almost certainly the same Im who sits upon the empty throne in the present day. Just like many other fans, I believe that Im has undergone the perennial youth surgery at the hands of a past user of the Ope Ope no Mi, and is thus effectively immortal. Although there might be some merit to the idea. No, that's a completely different theory. I'm not going there right now. However, in spite of the eternal youth, it seems entirely probable that over the course of 8 centuries, Im has probably taken lovers and had some children among the Tenryubito. Now, I will henceforth be referring to Im with male pronouns, as it's been brought to my attention that when Ivankov revealed his name as Nerona Im, he specifically used a male honorific with that name. So, unless or until it's definitively proven that Im is not male, that's how I'm going to speak of it. So, we know from Im's own words that he was somewhat fixated on Nefertari Lily. And still is to this day, really. For that reason, I propose that Nerona Im would name his children after the object of his obsession. Now, obviously, the name Lily is derived from the flower lily, but Lily itself as a name is generally considered a feminine name. However, after doing some research, a few hours worth, I discovered that there are indeed masculine names that can be derived from the same sources. Lily, or Lily, derives from the Latin lilium. In French, we find the masculine name Lillian. Now, yeah, I know that in many languages that too is considered a feminine name, but in French that is masculine, while Lillian is feminine. So, both names derive from the same root, Lillian and Lillian and Lily. And apparently Lillian was a popular boy's name in France and French-controlled territories in the 1700s, according to the research I did. Now, some sources also trace the name Liam to the same source, but there are other sources that say that it is instead derived from the name William, so that's a less likely possibility. But still, I am suggesting that the son of Eam most likely is named Nerona Lillian or Nerona Liam, who was the most recent one of Eam's children, was present among the other Tenryubito who were at God Valley for the human hunt, either with his mother or some kind of guardian. Like I said, maybe stuck in Tenryubito daycare. I don't know. And he was wearing a really ornately monogrammed onesie with the initials NL. Still not convinced? Then let's take it and look at the God Valley incident itself. Specifically, let's look at the Rocks pirates and piece together what they were doing at God Valley. Now, we know that Rox D. Xebec wanted to be king of the world, right? Well, for a child, that might be something they might come up with on their own, just because it sounds like fun to have everyone do what they say. But it doesn't really seem like something that any adult would wish for, unless they knew that there already was such a thing as a king of the world. Now, that's not a new idea to me. I've heard plenty of people talk about, well, if he wanted to be king of the world, then he already had to know that there was a king of the world. So don't credit me with that one. I've heard that one all over the place, and I am not going to name everybody that's suggested that. One, because that's too many people to name, and two, because I don't even remember all of them. The thing is, the type of person who would reign over the entire world is not the type of person who would relinquish that position easily. If Rox felt that he could achieve his goal of becoming king of the world by attacking the Tenryubito at God Valley, then he must have had a reason to believe that. But what could it have been? I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that he had reason to think that the Ope Ope no Mi was there, and He could have someone use it and give him immortality so he could be king of the world. Well, even if the fruit was there, and even if he could get someone to use it and perform the perennial youth surgery on him, that doesn't make him king of the world. That just makes him stay young forever. Or stay his current age forever. So, I mean, okay. That gives him more time to overthrow Eam and steal his throne, but that doesn't make him king of the world. Meanwhile, Eam is still sitting happily on his empty throne. On the other hand, even with several other Tenryubito there, what would make Rox think that Eam would give up his throne just because they were killed or taken hostage? That doesn't really seem plausible to me. Honestly, I find it likely that if that were actually the case, if Rox took the Tenryubito hostage to try and force Eam to step down so he could take the throne, Eam would probably just get a message to Garling somehow and tell him to kill the rest of the Tenryubito his damn self, taking away any bargaining power Rox once had, and then finally end Rox himself. So, yeah. Eam doesn't really care about them. Even if they are killed, he still has his power. So, that doesn't seem to be a good answer. No. To get that kind of person to give up their power, if anything is going to work, which is already a big if in the first place, but if anything's going to do it, it's going to have to be something a lot more personal. And probably involve a great deal of trickery as well. With that in mind, what if Rox learned that Eam, king of the world, had a son? And that this son was going to be along for the big human hunt event at God Valley. That's not just some random Tenryubito, but is rather Eam's own flesh and blood. I could see Rox thinking that with Eam's own child as his hostage, he might just have the leverage to make Eam abdicate his throne in order to protect his progeny. Or at least to lure Eam into a position where he could be taken out with trickery. Then Rox himself, of course, could step up and claim the throne. Honestly, I can't think of anything else that could have been at God Valley that would even have had a chance of letting Rox fulfill his ambition. Now, mind you, I'm not entirely convinced that Eam would have cared enough about his child to cede his throne to Rox in order to save the kid. But it absolutely makes sense that Rox might see this as a logical plan. So, here's how I see events unfolding. Rox D. Xebec learns that the traditional Tenryubito human hunt will be held at God Valley, and that the child of the King of the World will be present at the festivities. So, he and his crew plan an attack in order to take the child hostage and demand the throne. However, even knowing the why, there are still a lot of questions remaining about the God Valley incident. how did Rox learn that Eam exists? Or that he had a son? Or that Eam's son would be present at God Valley? Or that the human hunt was going to take place at God Valley? How is it that Gol D. Roger and Monkey D. Garp just happened to be there at just the right time to team up and stop Rox? Why would Garp, whose hatred of the Tenryubito is fairly well known, at least among the people who know him, why would he stand up and defend the Tenryubito against Rox? Why would Roger, a pirate and an outlaw, fight for the rulers of the same world government that labeled him a criminal? Who else is present at God Valley, and in what capacity? Well, I've poured myself into some intense research, and I think I've figured out those answers. So, beyond the Rox pirates, as I mentioned, we know from chapter 1095 that Kuma was present, as well as a young Ivankov and Ivankov's sister, Ginny. We also know there were a large number of Tenryubito there for the hunt, including Garling and Saturn, as well as an unknown number of slaves. We know there were the natives of God Valley. Finally, we know that Monkey D. Garp and Gol D. Roger were there, as Sengoku told us that it was the two of them working together who were able to stop the Rox pirates and protect the Tenryubito. But again, what were they doing there? The wording Sengoku used when talking about their involvement always struck me as odd. So, Roger and Garp happened to be there exactly when they were needed to team up and stop the Rox pirates. Does that feel a little strange to anyone else? Okay, I'll admit that 1095 does show us that the Tenryubito have a contingent of Marines present just off the coast of God Valley. But there are two problems with that line of thought. First, the whole reason Garp has never accepted any promotion beyond Vice Admiral is because at these lower ranks he has a degree of autonomy, while at a higher rank he would fall under the direct control of the Tenryubito, for whom he has a very deep loathing. Sure, he could have been ordered to God Valley as part of the protection detail for the Tenryubito, but if we're being totally honest here, I think Garp might have just ignored such an order in order just to stay away from the Tenryubito. Plus, if he was there under orders, then he didn't just happen to be there. The second problem with thinking of the Marine contingent there is that it could only possibly explain Garp's presence. It doesn't tell us a damn thing about why Roger happened to be there. So what in the world were those two doing there? Well, let me remind you again that Garp has a deep-seated hatred of the Tenryubito. And Roger, even though he wasn't yet the Pirate King and the most wanted man in the world, just like Garp's future grandson, he was all about freedom. So the Tenryubito and everything they stand for would have been a complete abomination to his sensibilities. there's also the lingering unanswered question of just how Rox would have got his intel about the secret king of the world and his family. In all honesty, all of those pieces fit perfectly together for me to come up with one very clear picture. Monkey D. Garp and Gol D. Roger formed an alliance with Rox D. Xebec in order to take down Eam and the Tenryubito. Think about it. All three of them are from the D clan, the enemy of the gods. Garp and Roger have fundamental reasons to stand against them, and Rox supposedly wanted to be king of the world, meaning that at a bare minimum, he would see Eam and the Tenryubito as obstacles on the path to his goal that had to be removed. In other words, they would have had a common goal. We know from 1094 and 1095 that any Marine of Commodore rank or below is forbidden to even lay eyes on the Gorosei. That is a pretty important distinction, because we know from Sengoku's lore dump that Garp was already a vice admiral at the time of the God Valley incident, meaning he would have been allowed to hold an audience with the Gorosei. Now think about this. If a character as inept as Wapol was able to listen in on a conversation between the Gorosei and Nefertari Cobra, with Eam himself arriving in the middle of that conversation, yet Wapol was not caught, discovered, nothing, is able to get away without a hitch. If someone like Wapol could do that, then isn't it within the realm of possibility that during some visit to Marijois to meet with the Gorosei, or for whatever reason, Garp overheard some conversation the Gorosei held amongst themselves, or possibly directly with Eam, in which he became aware of Eam's existence? And is it not also possible that Garp might then relay this information to someone he sees as a like-minded individual who wants to see the Tenryubito removed? I'm suggesting that not only did Garp have an established history with Roger, but that he also knew and trusted Rox, leaking key information to him as it was learned. So, I'm saying that at some point, Garp overheard the location of the next human hunt, and the fact that Eam's own child would be going to this event. And he quickly relayed this information to Rox. Following that, Garp called in his friend Roger, and the two of them sat down with Rox to form up a plan. I suspect that the plan would involve Rox's crew specifically attacking the Tenryubito at God Valley, while Rox himself would go find Lillian and eliminate his guards, then take the kid. As soon as the Rox pirates began their attack, Garp would evacuate the Tenryubito, rescuing them just so he wouldn't appear complicit, but also to ensure that none of them could notice the real objective until it was too late. With all of the panic and confusion going on, the Roger pirates could slip in and free the slaves. I'm sure Garp was initially hesitant about all of this, but I'm also sure that Rox would have offered his own assurance to Garp that no innocent people would be hurt, and the child, Lillian, would be well cared for throughout the entire hostage situation. So, because of some shared history between them that we don't yet know about, I feel like Garp is going to trust him here and go along with the plan. Roger, of course, is always excited for a new adventure, so I can see him also accepting those assurances and jumping on board. I imagine there'd probably be a little more discussion about what would follow after the God Valley incident. Maybe Garp and Roger aren't aware that Rox wanted to be the sole king of the world. Maybe they spoke of the three of them ruling together, or even that after the fall of Eam they would hold an election for the people to elect their own worthy leader. So, I don't know. There's all sorts of possibilities. But with all of them in agreement, they separate and head to make their own ways to God Valley. Now, I feel like Garp would bring his son Dragon along for this. I think it's no coincidence that Dragon is 55 years old in the present post-time skip timeline. Meaning that 38 years ago, he just happened to be the exact same age at the time of this pivotal event that I think is what sets him on his true path. He just happens to be the exact same age at that time as his son would later be when leaving Dawn Island to take his first steps on the path to becoming the Pirate King. Interestingly, I was already including the idea that a 17-year-old Monkey D. Dragon would be brought along on this trip, even before 1095 revealed that two of his future Revolutionary Army collaborators were present at God Valley. I have the original version of this script that I could show the date the file was created. It was before 1095 came out. So, you see, I rather suspect that Dragon, somewhat like Luffy, was probably kind of naive in his youth. And without his own red-haired Shanks to inspire him down the path of the pirate, I find it likely he would probably have some idealized version of the Marines and the world government that his father served. All that filling his head, it's likely he enlisted as soon as he was old enough to do so. So, it's for those reasons that I think Garp would have pulled some strings in order to get his son assigned to him. At least at the time of the human hunt was going to take place. That way he could bring Dragon along. I think he would believe the boy should see the real evils of the rulers of the world, so he could understand Garp's actions in secretly working against them. I'm also sure he never told the boy all of the details of what was going on, neither about what prompted his alliance with Rox and Roger, nor what they were actually trying to accomplish at God Valley. That way, if anything went wrong, Dragon would at least be protected. He wouldn't be implicated. Meanwhile, what Garp and Roger were unaware about is the fact that Rox had his own plan. En route to God Valley, I'm sure Rox pulls all of his crew together for a big briefing during which he tells them that they are to kill everyone in sight. Local, slave, Tenryubito, doesn't matter. If it's alive, kill it. This is going to ensure maximum chaos, thus allowing Rox himself to go unnoticed as he slips in to kidnap Lillian. Upon reaching God Valley, the Rox pirates end up doing just that. Now, we do know that Whitebeard is not a bad person. So, I don't think he would speak up at the time Rox was giving these orders, but I also can't imagine him running around God Valley slaughtering innocent people. So, because the original plan likely called for Garp evacuating the Tenryubito, I imagine he would have arranged to have several marine grunts at his disposal. They reach the island and see chaos. So before he has a understanding of exactly what's going on, he probably would go ahead and send out those Marines to evacuate the Tenryubito as was planned. With all of that going on, I find it likely that this idealistic young version of Dragon would have gone with the Marines to aid in the evacuation. But he gets onto the island and he sees the Rox pirates just indiscriminately killing everyone that they come across. But worse, I think Dragon will watch with his own eyes as the Tenryubito, who he looked up to as the divine and perfect rulers of the world, are using locals and or slaves as human shields that the Rox pirates in turn are just mowing down in their efforts to get at the Tenryubito. The Tenryubito just cowering in fear, throwing more and more collateral damage out there to avoid getting killed themselves. Seeing the Tenryubito's wanton disregard for life, I'm sure cemented Dragon's resolve to stand against them. But at the same time, the brutality of the Rox pirates, I'm sure, also convinced him that piracy wasn't the right way for him to go either. The immediate decision I see him making, I think he's going to tear off the shirt of his uniform and that Marine hat, throw it aside in anger, and run forward to help. Not help the Tenryubito, but to help the slaves. He's going to set them free and get them out of there so they don't get hurt anymore. At this point, it's actually entirely possible that Dragon might even kill a Tenryubito himself if one tries to stop him. Either way, at a bare minimum, Dragon is at least going to free Kuma, Ivankov, and Jenny. Then Dragon and whatever slaves he frees are going to take advantage of the chaos to head for the docks, steal a ship, and slip away. Disgusted by the actions of both sides, and with his father for his involvement, both in working for such disgusting people as the world government and for going along with such a ruthless attack that disregarded the lives of innocent people there. So Dragon leaves God Valley on his own, and that's going to leave a tremendous rift between father and son that really still hasn't healed even after both parties have learned the whole truth. Yes, it's true that it's not going to be until years later, after the Ohara Buster call, that Dragon ultimately teams up with Kuma and Ivankov to start the Revolutionary Army. But that doesn't mean that they can't already have that friendship. In fact, if they're going to go in together on something that big, standing against such a powerful enemy as the world government, kind of need to be friends for a while first. You don't want to go up against a massive government power with people you don't know that well. In the meantime, Dragon on his own will go on to start the Freedom Fighters, which sadly does not do much. But the seeds for all of that are first sown right here at God Valley. Now, when Garp witnesses the indiscriminate killing and realizes that he's been deceived, he's going to rally his Marines to step up the evacuation, defend lives. Then he's going to go look for Roger to see if he was in on this. Because he may not have fully trusted Rox, but I feel like he and Roger have a pretty deep respect and trust for each other. I may be wrong on that. I don't know. I may be reading way too much into it, but I feel like that's a thing. At the same time, Roger is also appalled to see the Rox pirates killing slaves and civilians as well as Tenryubito. So he's going to send his crew out to fight off the Rox pirates before he goes to meet up with Garp. I do suspect at some point Roger is going to see Whitebeard not killing people. He may in fact be freeing slaves and helping innocent people. Perhaps this could even be when Whitebeard meets a certain young pineapple-headed future phoenix. I do believe that Garp will probably witness his son's decision and watch him flee the island with the freed slaves. When Garp finally meets up with Roger, he'll learn that Roger is just as surprised and disgusted by this flagrant violence against innocent bystanders as he is. And the two of them figure out that this was Rox's true plan all along. And that's when they make the decision that they have to work together to stop Rox. Not for the sake of the Tenryubito, but rather to save the lives of as many innocents as possible. With both of their respective crews going about their tasks, the future hero of the Marines and the future Pirate King team up to find and stop Rox D. Xebec himself. Now, in all of this insanity, I'm sure the guards that were overlooking the young children are all going to end up dead, either at the hands of Rox himself or of his crew. And it's probably during that battle that the mother of a certain red-haired Figureland baby is going to grab her kid and run, probably getting mortally wounded in the process. So she ends up hiding her child in a treasure chest in hopes that whoever discovers the baby will be kind and merciful. Also, during that battle, I think the terrified Lillian is going to manage to get away from the area where the little kids are, crawl somewhere to hide, probably just before the arrival of his would-be captor. Before Rox is able to find the kid, Garp and Roger arrive to face him. Ultimately, they're going to take him down, but I feel like the fight's going to be pretty epic. Now, unaware of the hiding toddler, Roger and Garp are going to grab the rest of the kids there, and they're going to retreat. They're going to get out of there. They beat Rox. What that entails, I can't say. Maybe Roger killed him. Maybe Garp killed him. Garp doesn't seem like the type that would handle betrayal well. Maybe Garp flags down a couple of Marines to cuff him and take him away. I don't know. But Rox is beaten, so I say at that point they just grab the kids and get out of there. Now, in addition to the Shanks is a Tenryubito theory and the NL is a Tenryubito theory, I've also heard a Buggy is a Tenryubito theory. So, perhaps one of the kids that Roger grabs is a certain blue-haired infant with a giant red nose, who is undoubtedly the most whiny kid of the bunch. Anyways, as Roger and Garp head back to their ships, they feel the island start to shake. Both men gather everyone they see as they go and direct them to the ships for evacuation. They both flee, Roger to his own ship, Garp to one of the marine vessels carrying the evacuees, all sailing away as fast as the winds will carry them in fear of a tsunami caused by the earthquake. It wouldn't be until later that Garp would realize that the child Rox had been after wasn't actually among the people evacuated. With Rox either dead or captured after his defeat, Garp knew Rox didn't have the kid. And since Roger's crew were keeping the rest of the Rox pirates busy, he also would have known that none of them had managed to take the kid. Meaning, Lillian had to be somewhere hiding on the island. Now, at the same time, of course, word is going to spread that something happened to the world nobles, the Tenryubito. And hearing about this incident, I'm sure reporters are waiting for the marine vessels when they reach the port at the nearest marine base. And while I'm sure Garp is going to refuse to comment, a bunch of the other Marines, who probably were too busy to see that Roger had been involved, are going to give their accounts of how Garp was directly responsible for saving the lives of the Tenryubito and then go after Rox on his own. As soon as he's able to, Garp's going to take a marine ship and head back to God Valley in order to look for Lillian, only to discover the island has completely disappeared. So after that, Garp will go on to report to Sengoku, but while he will tell his friend and commanding officer more than he ever would tell anybody else, he still couldn't tell him everything. He just couldn't. Nobody could know that he had allied with the pirates not to save the Tenryubito, but to actually help bring about their downfall in the first place. In the years following this, as we know, he avoids the subject of God Valley as much as possible. And I'm sure he was almost glad when the world government decided to erase the incident from history, as that gives him an excuse not to talk about it. As for Roger, at some point while he was at God Valley, I suspect he probably found something. Maybe some ancient relic, maybe even a poneglyph that he's able to decipher with the voice of all things. And whatever it is he finds, that's going to light a fire inside of him that inspires him and his crew to set out with a new and specific goal: to reach the final island of the Grand Line and find the centuries old treasure that's hidden there. As for other characters, well, Garling, he's no pushover, and he's not going to cower in fear like the majority of the Tenryubito when the shit hits the fan. Garling is going to jump right out into the fray, since he, after all, is one of the God's Knights. So he's going to be at least fighting off the Rocks pirates, but it's just as possible that he is not going to choose sides. He is going to fight anyone that's not a Marine. So he may be going against Rocks pirates and the Roger pirates, just not caring. I also suspect that at some point, even though I don't think Whitebeard is going to take part in the murders, I don't think the fact that he isn't participating will stop Garling. So at some point, the two will cross paths, and Garling will give Whitebeard the scars that he mentioned in that conversation with Shanks. Saint Saturn? Who the hell knows what he's gonna do? I can't even begin to guess. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talk about his transformation being the Ushioni, and how it's known to have poisoning effects, being able to cause incurable disease, and all of that. So maybe he poisons Roger during this event, and it's a slow-acting, incurable illness that later on leads to him turning himself in when he's dying. Who knows? That's all stuff that plenty of other people have gone into with the Ushioni and possible connection to Roger's illness and all that. So look at pretty much any other video about the possibilities for God Valley since the revelation of Saturn's transformation, and you'll see all of the different possibilities other people are suggesting. I mainly wanted to cover the stuff that I'm not hearing from anyone else. So what's the significance of all of this? I mean, sure, it's all fascinating, but what bearing could this possibly have on the current story? Well, other than Kuma showing up and somehow bailing out the Straw Hats, so Nika can in turn save his daughter just as he promised her at some point in the past, like we saw in the flashbacks before it got to God Valley. I'm not really sure what, if any, ramifications it will have on the rest of the Egghead Island arc, unless there is something specific with Saturn. However, I'm still glad you asked. You see, Nerona Lillian is going to come back into the story at some point. You don't think so? Well, think about this logically. We got a cover story following Enel as he went to the moon, found ancient ruins with hieroglyphs and all sorts of weird little automata. He met space pirates and just all sorts of crazy shit. Of course, all the stuff he did isn't the key part. The key part is literally, we got a cover story following Enel. Think about all of the cover stories we've gotten throughout the run of the series. We got one following Mini Buggy after Luffy Gomu Gomu no Bazookaed him away from Orangetown. Followed him as he made his way back to his crew and teamed up with Alvida. We got a cover story following Kobe and Homepo as they enlist in the Marines and train under Garp. We got one following the members of CP9 after their defeat at Aeneas Lobby. We got one following Jinbei through various undersea adventures after Whole Cake Island. We got one following Caribou that actually gave him something of a redemption arc as it got him from Fishman Island to Wano. I'm not going to list all of the cover stories, but there have been plenty of them along the way. The key thing is that all of the cover stories we've had follow characters who show up again. There are only two exceptions at this point. That's Bartolomeo, who, let's be serious now, Grand Fleet is showing up again, and Bartolomeo is not missing that. The ultimate Luffy fanboy is not gonna just skip out when Luffy finally calls in the Grand Fleet. Honestly, I have a feeling he's gonna show up again even before that, but that's for another video. And the second exception is Enel himself. So there is no doubt in my mind that Enel is going to show up again. I believe the ruins we saw him find on the moon will have revealed enough of the truth to him that he's going to come back, probably with an army of those automata, and maybe even being allied with the space pirates. He's going to show up just in time for the final war, is my main guess. Question is, which side is he going to be on, though? Will he back up his father and resume his rightful place atop the endless Varth that is the Red Line at Marijois? Will he have been moved deeply enough by the lost history he's discovered and by everything that's happened along the way that he's going to decide to join his former enemy Luffy and take down the evil Im? Will he fight both sides equally in hopes of taking everything for himself? Those are answers that I don't yet have, alas. But I have no doubt whatsoever that he will be there. And there you have it. My evidence that Enel is not just a Tenryubito, but is the child of Im himself, as well as being the target Rox was seeking when attacking the Tenryubito at God Valley, using intel and assistance from none other than Monkey D. Garp and Gol D. Roger. Of course, I don't expect every little detail of this to be correct. In fact, I would be utterly astonished if that was the case, if I'm going to be entirely honest about it. Like, maybe there's not a Tenryubito daycare set up. Maybe the kids are just with their mothers while the fathers go off and do the hunt. Maybe Anel is not Eames' child, maybe not even a Tenryubito, and it's some other reason that Rox is there. Maybe he just feels like if he kills off all of the Tenryubito, then he can take over the world. So he gets the leaked information from Garp about where the human hunt is going to take place and heads for God Valley just for his own hunt of Tenryubito. Either way, I still feel like my key points are valid and likely. Those key points being that Garp was working with Rox and Roger, and they were betrayed by Rox, leaving them in a position where they had to fight against Rox in order to protect the lives of the innocents. The fact that they were also protecting the Tenryubito was immaterial. Probably left a bad taste in both of their mouths, but it was necessary in order to save the innocent people too. So, what do you think? Am I onto something? Have I lost my mind? Did I miss something? Anything relevant? Share your thoughts down in the comments. I'd love to hear your ideas. If you enjoyed this theory, then now is the time to go ahead and hit that like button down there. And while you're at it, if you thought this was good and you're interested in what I have forthcoming, I've got at least 8 different scripts started for theories, and quite a few others that I have planned out that I haven't actually started on scripts for. So if you're interested in that, as well as chapter reviews I'm going to be starting before long, and all sorts of other stuff. So if you're interested in all of that, then go ahead and slap the red off of that subscribe button and ring my bell just to make sure you're notified when I upload new content. In the meantime, I just want to thank you all for hanging out with me and listening to the whole theory. I know it was a bit long, but it fits so many things and answers so many questions that, again, I really feel like at least a few parts of it have to be right. Anyways, hope to see you guys down in the comments sharing your thoughts, and I hope that you'll join me again next time. Catch you all later.